This time. There we go. All righty, we're live.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Marky. For all of you just joining us, we are speaking today with Andrew Macpherson. He is the Accessibility Core Maintainer for Drupal, and he has a whole list of information about Drupal 8. Thank you, Marky. For all of you just joining us, we are
who's
today with Andrew Macpherson. He is the Accessibility Core Maintainer for Drupal. And he has a
who has the I have the thing live.
About Drupal 8.
Let me turn that off. There we go. Who's
He is the Accessibility Core Maintainer for Drupal. And he has a
who has the I have the thing live. Let me turn that off. Now there's this odd blank silent with me holding the double horns. Is it open somewhere else?
I can still hear it.
I had it open in 2 places. Yay!
All right.
Sorry, everybody. I'm glad you liked that recap. Is not my thing. So sorry.
All right.
Off we go.
Well, hey, no. Yeah, hey. Good to get all the details over with now. Andrew, want to take it away?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I hope if you mute your microphones unless you got a question or something, and hopefully, Donna, could you look out if anyone has a question in the group chat? I'm gonna share my screen with you. That's how I'm going to start off with entire screen. Okay, hopefully you should now see a whole bunch of windows on my screen, including there you go. There's a standard installation of Drupal on Simply Test Me. So thanks for everyone who's come here. The topic for today is that we're going to take a look at some of the stuff that is currently active as issues that we're exploring in the Drupal 8 issue queue. Now, when we set up how we were going to, what topic I was going to do, had the idea that instead of trying to pick one myself, I'd ask people what they wanted to actually know about. And so that's today's talk. That's my Drupal.org profile. So if you see this picture here of like a spacesuit character, that's who I am. And Carrie set up a poll, and the idea was that I'd let you all decide what you would actually like to hear about, and we got 24 votes, so that's brilliant. I picked what I thought were 3 fabulous topics, and then put the let's a general look at Drupal core issues as a fallback, and the fallback won. So that's what we're going to do. But I thought what I'd start off with first is a quick look at the 3 that didn't win. Here's what you could have had, and the reason is because I do have all those 3 issues in the Drupal issue queues as plans that we can work on. So we have this one, modernizing our ARIA usage, and there is this thing called the ARIA authoring practices guide. It's a W3C document, and its aim is to take a number of common widgets like tab sets or date pickers or accordions, and describe the best practices for markup and ARIA states and properties and roles, and also keyboard behaviors that are expected, with the idea that it will be something that application developers, website developers can use to, hopefully standardize some of this stuff across the web. And I've started it off with a few things that I think we could benefit from. For instance, we already have a vertical tabs thing in Drupal. We should be able to find one. Well, I won't bother with that. You all know what it looks like, hopefully. But it kind of works with a keyboard, and it kind of works with a screen reader, but it's nowhere near the same kind of experience as you get with tabs on a desktop application. And that's the thing that the ARIA authoring practices has guidelines on how we could do that. Last year, I was at a conference in Edinburgh, and I was fortunate enough to meet one of the editors of that and told him that I had some ideas about how we could use it in Drupal. And the interesting thing there is the impression I get is it kind of is meant to be like a living document, a living guide, rather than something that's set in stone and finalized forever. So if assistive technology changes, they might be able to update it. And so, there is a chance here that I think we could, if we have some of this in Drupal core, then in a way we're kind of helping the whole web modernize by being a major implementer of these suggested patterns. So that's that one. The other two, WebCAG 2.1 and the high contrast mode. So I opened up a new issue for WebCAG 2.1. At the moment, it's like an extended note to self. All the comments come from me mainly. And there's a list of the new things that they're going to want us to do. They're all at level A or AA, so they all come within our accessibility gate. Whenever we've got new stuff making changes happening in Drupal core, it has to pass through what we call our accessibility gate. That's my main job as a topic maintainer, is to kind of enforce that. And our gate currently says WebCAG 2.0. Now, when this is ready, the target is for mid-2018. It's not like, oh my goodness, we suddenly have to meet 2.1. Our gate will still say 2.0. But once we start meeting as many of these as we can, or as many as we deem to be in scope, then we can update our gate and say from now on 2.1 is what we're going by. But at the moment, it's still a working draft at the W3C. And so really, that's just me keeping track of it. And the last one, make our core themes more robust in Windows high contrast mode. I talked about this in DrupalCon Dublin, and to get the point across, a couple of screenshots show it. This is what our dialog box looks like. And there's a number of interesting features in the design. We can see that the background changes, and it's fairly easy to tell where the edges of the dialog box are, because they've got different background color to the surrounding page. We can easily identify the heading. There's a close box, and then down at the bottom we can find that the buttons have got they're in their own little section with a different background color, and we can identify the primary button, which is in blue. But if we go and have a look in Windows high contrast mode, there's a lot of this missing. We don't have a very neatly defined dialog box with the edges. We can see the heading, but we can't we're losing the background colors there. And crucially, the close button is missing. It does work if you hit in the right place, you just can't see it. And we don't see the emphasis on the apply button, the difference between a primary and a secondary button. But with a few CSS tweaks, we can improve it. We can, get a nice little border around it and make the header and button areas more easy to, they can stand out more. This one doesn't fix the icon. You can also see the icons are missing in the toolbar at the top as well. And we still can't tell the buttons apart by emphasis on the apply. But that's an example of some of the improvements we could make there. So, yeah, I'll just stick with full screen for the time being. Another thing that has happened recently, I thought let's go and talk about some recent work. I've got a little set of notes here that I'm going on. All right, that's a choice of 4 topics. Some recent developments that we've had. We had a sprint a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago, and that was hosted in the Netherlands. And the inline form errors was one of the main topics that people worked on. Daniel Schmidt, the maintainer of inline form errors, was there, and there was a a bunch of experienced core contributors, some of whom were accessibility contributors helping novices. We got a lot of great progress on inline form errors. It's very, very close. To give you an idea of what the remaining issues are, we've got until August 7th or July 30th for the main ones. We're down to 5 issues. One of those is green, it's RTBC. This one is a thing which we have working, and we've got test coverage. The only thing left is that one of the JavaScript maintainers thinks we should move something to a different file. I kind of agree with him, but it's very close. This one I haven't, this one I haven't been following too closely, but it has had a lot of work done in it recently, and there's a patch to review. One is an API thing which lets you disable the inline form errors, is RTBC. This last one it is about things like vertical tabs and collapsible details, and letting you know that there is actually here is a closed accordion details, and you need to let people know that there is an error inside it. And the same goes with the tabs. The third tab is focused, but we can see that there is an error in the first tab. That's very close to being finished. We've got that working. We've got test coverage. The only thing left is to get some fallback text for the little cross icon that's there, and then we're done. And the last one is the documentation. We actually had that at RTBC as well, but we're down to grammar errors now and spelling mistakes. It's very close. So that's I'm really excited about getting that in time for Drupal core. I think 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we're going to do it, I think. Back to my little plan. So that was the inline form errors. We had a couple of other recent major wins as well. These are the first one is we have this Drupal announce JavaScript method, and we introduced that. And the idea was that whenever we have something on the page that changes, but does so without a page reload, then we can use Drupal announce in our JavaScript to make sure a screen reader can get wind of that. A really simple example of this is when we go down to our module listing, where we enable modules, we have a little filter box. I'll turn on a screen reader.
Name, install new module. Link list, item list with 1 items.
Great. So
filter modules with hint filter by name or description.
So,
edit text, search engine.
Shush. So if we're on this filter box, the idea is that we might have some rough idea of what we're looking for as one of the modules, and if I think it's got something to do with error.
What modules are available in the modified list?
I can find the inline form errors module, but the key thing was that we had a change on the page which didn't involve a page reload. It was just a bit of JavaScript going on to reduce the number of things on display. And we used Drupal announce to say,
H. 2 modules are available in the modified list.
2 modules are available. And when Drupal 8.0 shipped, this was one of the few places where we made use of Drupal announce. And if we were to go to somewhere like
structure, group, Chrome box is now inactive.
Views, we would find that there's also another list here.
Name, filter by view name. T. What? T. C. T.
We don't get that same kind of feedback about, telling us how many options are now left once we've changed what's in the filter box. So that's an example where we thought we ought to add that The same goes on the block listing and in some of the dialogues that you see inside of views. And so during last week's
window Drupal multi Chrome box is now inactive.
Gosh, right, okay. Getting back to the sprint last weekend, we had a really good issue which got to RTBC, which was when you're selecting a block to place, you will get the same kind of announcement that we saw on the module list. And what's really, really good about it is we built some tests in. We put some tests in there. There's a new functional JavaScript test framework in Drupal 8, and the great thing about that is it simulates loading up a page, and then we can make some interactions with it, like type something in the filter box. And the great thing here is it checks that the Drupal.announce gives a expected message, and that's really exciting. So wherever else we're using some messages to clarify what's going on with the screen reader, we can, repeat the same approach and test coverage there. So that's really, really good. It's a great use of the functional JavaScript tests, is that they can interact with the page and give you the results of some JavaScript. Before that framework, we kind of couldn't really do that. There was another major bug fixed. This wasn't at the sprint. This was, I think this got committed in the week before the sprint. But there was a bug where some buttons that were using Ajax, and there's quite a lot of them. The one that I found it on was if you're in the field API and you're looking around here, we've got loads of fields, and I'm a keyboard user, and I decide that what I would really like to do is change the size of the image that we're using. I'll tab through the label, the formatter, and there's a little cogwheel icon which is focusable, and we had a regression in the days running up to in the final release candidates and so on, betas and release candidates of Drupal 8.0. That stopped working with a keyboard, and the good news is somebody fixed it. It now works, and that also has test coverage. The great thing about the functional JavaScript testing is that not only can we load up a page and interact with it, but we can distinguish between mouse presses and key presses, and that's a really great thing to be able to stop a regression like this, where this was working with a mouse, but it wasn't working if your keyboard had focus on it. So we've fixed that now. There was a few other Ajax buttons. Other places you find it are on the image widget. If you've uploaded an image, there's a button which lets you remove the image, and that had stopped working because it was the same system. So that was going to be a big problem for content authors who were relying on a keyboard. So that's an exciting thing that we've fixed recently. I thought next I could pick out a few things that are still open in the issue queue and which are a great thing for people to work on. Some of them are giving us a little bit of trouble. Some of them maybe just haven't been touched for a while. If they haven't been touched, they move down the listings on the issue queue and get even less attention. So I quite like sometimes to go back and look at things which haven't been touched and see if we can move them along a bit, or whether they're still relevant. One of the things that you can do already for Drupal 8 with a contrib module is, let me see if I can find that contrib module. Keyboard stopped working. What happened there? Spelling it right, it might have some underscores. Yeah. This is the one, yeah. One of the things that they have for CK Editor, let's see if that image opens up, is that there's an add-on button you can get. It's got a little accessibility universal icon action, universal access icon. And the idea is that if you're working in CK Editor, then you can run that and it's going to go through the content of that field, say your article body text, and go through and find things like, you've uploaded an image and embedded an image in your body, but you haven't provided any alternative text. And it brings up this little dialogue, finds you the image, and then says that here, what you need to do is provide some text, and you can just do it right now. And that's something we would love to have as a feature for content authors in Drupal. But we started an issue for this in Drupal core, and I thought it was going to be quite an easy thing to get done, but it turns out that there were a whole lot of performance problems with the way that different JavaScript libraries were being packaged, and that turned out to be a packaging problem that was upstream in the CK Editor project. And then another snag hit, which is that the thing that we're seeing here, it was using an accessibility library called Quail.js. Quail.js was maintained by Jessie Beach, who was my predecessor, one of the former D8 accessibility maintainers. She now works at Facebook. The Quail.js library that she worked on, they've gone ahead and deprecated it and said that there's too many other projects that are doing the same thing, such as the Chrome accessibility tools or the Axe core library. So they've deprecated Quail. So if we want to get anything like this happening in CK Editor, then it means that the plugin upstream is going to have to be updated to use a different library before we can get it into core. So for the moment, if you want it, it's still there in contrib. But it would be great to get that in core. So that's something that's annoying. We've got quite a bit of a hold up there. Two others I picked out. One was, let me see if I can find that issue. Indeed, here we go. Here's the list. Views, table. Here we go. This started off as a bug report, which Mike and I disagreed with. We said, no, it's not a bug report. The bug that was originally there said you've got table headers at the top of a table, but you need to go and add ones for table rows to make an accessible table. And this was the original bug report. When I thought about it, that it's not quite a bug, it's more of a feature request, because not every table requires them. The idea is that there's a whole bunch of different ways you could build tables. You could have, this is the one we have now. If you're building with Drupal views and get a table, it has just one row of headers at the top. But there's the idea that you could have headers at the top and headers down the side for each row too, as well as a few more complicated ones. And realized that we could probably get away with adding support for some of this into core, into the way that the views table display works. And so sure enough, we went through, and this issue has gone on, and that here we go. We've got the settings for so we can get a bigger version of that. There we go. We can get the settings where we would add something going on here, and so when you're dealing with all the fields, and which are going to be columns, you can say this one's going to be, we're going to say that the title is also going to be a row header, and the lots of things you could use that for, like product comparisons or calendars and timetables, whatever any content manager or site builder comes up with. It's it will be an entirely optional thing that they could use. And it had a lot of good progress. There was a bit of discussion about what the interface should be, but we got the markup working. There might be some demonstrations. Yeah, there's a demonstration of how ugly it looks in Bartik, but sure enough, the point is it's there and it works. And the headers are not the first column; it's one column off. So that's really cool too. And then that issue has kind of stalled. That was the alternative idea about how we might change the way we use the settings. It went on and on, a few more re-rolls, a few more updates, and when was it last touched? 2 months ago. So whilst we've been looking at inline form errors, this is a good example of something I think is nearly there, and we could quite easily go ahead and finish. Hide that one. What else did I pick out? Block titles. There's an interesting thing about blocks in Drupal 8. Let's go to the main page of a site install. These are two blocks, search and tools. I mean, they've both got a heading, search and tools. So one of the things you can do is that you can go and edit one of these blocks and say, I don't want to display the title, this checkbox we've got there. And if you turn off that checkbox, here is what you have. So you either have a block which has got a level 2 heading, or a block which doesn't have any heading. And so the issue we've got is to kind of expand that. So elsewhere in Drupal 8, we have when we're looking at fields which are on a content type and how they're displayed, we've got the option of hiding the label completely, or displaying it above, or including it as a visually hidden thing. We thought it'd be really good to extend that to block titles, so that if here we could either have a visible heading, no heading, or maybe this could have an invisible heading that said search and could be found by screen reader navigation. So that is also open in core and is been making good progress, but I think we haven't touched it for a few months, and it's one that's nearly there. We could have that in Drupal 8.4 if we hurry, 8.5 if not. And then I started looking for older stuff, and I kind of ran out of time before this session happened. I was frantically looking for issues to talk about. A while back, there was an idea that we might have a tooltip component in Drupal core. At the moment, if you, in some aspects of the admin settings, you're looking at the 7 theme, and you land on a page, and, jump to main content. No, that wasn't what I did. If you have this thing, we have this bookmarking star for the shortcuts, and it works on a hover, but it also quite nicely works with a keyboard focus. I can bookmark that with my keyboard, move through that, and I can remove it with a keyboard. I didn't use a mouse. My pointer is still down here. The idea was that we would maybe take that component, which is only used for that shortcut star, and see if we could have an accessible tooltip that was in use elsewhere on the admin screen. So on this page, for instance, it might be helpful to have some kind of tooltip over this settings cog. At the moment, it's just a cog wheel. Let's check if it has some alt text. Probably has some alt text. Source, it does have some alt text. It just says edit. That's good enough, but it would be nice if we had a visible tooltip there. So the idea that we could take this one, which worked with a mouse and keyboard, and have it appear over this cogwheel was one of the use cases. That, as far as I know, has been an issue that's been going on for years actually, and it hasn't been It was touched a lot in 2014 and then abandoned, and a couple of people commented on it in 2016, but it hasn't had any progress done on it. But that would be an interesting thing we could resurrect. That's kind of the end of everything I actually had prepared. We're 4:30. That's quite good time. There's still lots of time for questions or looking at other things. Let me see what I had somewhere. That's my Slack. Yeah, I lost the list of issues. So back to the list of accessibility issues. I've only talked about ones that are in Drupal core, but if you do a search for accessibility issues, you can see that there's stuff. Most of these are Drupal core. Some of them occasionally have there's a theme that someone's tagged with accessibility. If you are going to tag an issue with this one, accessibility, that tag there, that's just a general tag that we use for help people find things. We tag them accessibility, not A11y, and in contrib modules like media and Instagram block, we've had some interesting discussions where people have tagged things with accessibility, and I keep an eye on those and have a look at what those are, and sometimes offer feedback there and advice. There's also another tag that you can use. This one's got it. It says this one doesn't. One of the others will. There's another tag which says needs accessibility review, and if you see that one, that's really a kind of tag that's for the core maintainers themselves. So really, it's if something says needs accessibility review, it means that someone wants Mike Gifford or myself to weigh in an opinion on it. Either they need an answer to something, or it means that they're not willing to go ahead and commit it unless we've given the thumbs up. I think that as well as Drupal core, there are some really interesting ideas going on in contrib. This was a D7 module, the Instagram block. The idea there is that you can you just get a block and you put in a few configuration details like an Instagram username or an API key or something like that, and you shove a block in your sidebar and you get a little feed with recent images from Instagram, which is great. But all of those Instagram images need alt text, and over on the Instagram service you can add alt text, but lots of users just don't bother providing a caption. So when you make an API call to get stuff from Instagram, you get the images, but there isn't any kind of caption. So there's nothing that we can do really to provide any useful alt text. So this came up as an issue, and I weighed in on it, and we did a bit of research looking around the way that this was handled in other places, and recently they fixed it. And now, if Instagram doesn't provide any caption that you can use as an alt attribute, we actually shove one in. Themers can customize it. We say it's an Instagram image with no caption available. And the idea here is that users will know that it's not the website's problem, it's the Instagram user who have caused this problem. It's almost like "don't blame me" is what it's saying. But it's one of those things where if you didn't, you could say let's not have any alt text at all, and screen readers will be completely unaware that there are some wonderful images. But some Instagram users, of course, do provide captions, and we'd want to use those if we can. This might turn out to be a little bit verbose if you've got a feed of 10 images, but we think it's probably the best we can do. Another one that's worth looking at is web form. Now, web form, I looked at this recently, and I filed a bunch of accessibility issues. Some of them have been fixed. I found that the web form maintainer responded very, very quickly. There were some buttons about multiple value. Some of the settings, configuration settings for web form elements had some buttons which were just images with no alt text, and we've got those fixed. And there's a much more chewy issue there, which is that web form provides a toggle button, which isn't a checkbox and isn't a radio button. It's one of those iPhone style slider buttons, and they're just not accessible at all in that module. But web form is a site builder, content author feature. Content authors create really detailed forms without ever involving a developer. That's brilliant. But it's also a very, very popular module. And if there's there's a possibility here that content authors will be producing accessible content and they're not even aware of it. So if we could fix that in a contrib module, with it being such an important, top 10 contrib module, we would benefit a lot of sites by fixing that kind of thing. And the maintainer there was very, very responsive. So that's my roundup of what's currently going on. And I think what I'll do is I'll stop talking from my notes and see if there's any questions, or just move to a discussion about where we go next. One of the things I'd like to discuss is what we can do to get more people contributing to issues on accessibility issues in Drupal.
Now there are
over to everyone else.
In the chat. But I know that I'm wondering, what do you consider to be the biggest challenge? Is it just getting people involved, or is there a more specific challenge that?
I think definitely there's a numbers game. We would love to have more contributors, but I think, and I think the number of contributors is growing. We've had quite a lot of attention on accessibility at community sprints in the last year, maybe. DrupalCon Dublin had Barris from the Netherlands. He proposed, let's get a whole table and just make it a table at the sprint where we're doing nothing but accessibility. And that was great. We got a lot of the stuff to do with Drupal Announce worked on there, and inline form errors. And then there was a global accessibility, the global Drupal contribution sprint, which was 20 or 30 events all around the world for a weekend. We had one locally here in Yorkshire, and I think we had about 8 people, and half of them were working on accessibility issues. DrupalCon in, where was the last one? Baltimore? Was that the last one? Yeah, Mike ran a core accessibility sprint, and got some first-time contributors reporting accessibility bugs. So that was great. And of course, we had this one that just the other week that was dedicated purely to Drupal accessibility. So we're getting more contributors. The bigger challenge, I think, is that we might see what's stopping people contributing to accessibility issues. I think there might be a confidence or skill issue there, that nearly all the accessibility issues require a lot of manual testing, and to do that you're going to need to know what the expected behavior is, whether it's like keyboard navigation, or how to operate a screen reader. And I think both of those are quite a big learning curve if you've never dealt with them before. So if there's a screen reader issue and you've no idea how a screen reader works, then that's a big barrier to you being able to contribute to it. So maybe what we need to be doing is teaching more core contributors how to use screen readers, how to do some basic testing. take something like VoiceOver on the Mac, or NVDA's got it as well. You can have a little visual window which is like a speech bubble for what the audio is currently saying. And it occurred to me that that can be included in screenshots, and you know, that's stuff that we can accept as evidence of testing. So when we're reviewing issues, so if we could get more people using a screen reader and understanding a few of the basic things like keyboard operation and knowing about enter and space and tab and when the arrow keys come into play, that would be a really good thing. One of the other issues I briefly mentioned, I went on a bit at some length, the Windows high contrast stuff. If you're going to be working on those issues, let me just share the screen again. If where's the button? Yeah, the Windows high contrast stuff. If you're, looking at implementing this, or even just finding where the bugs are, what's missing here? We're missing the blue image. We're missing the close button. This is something you don't need to know how to use a screen reader. You don't need to know any JavaScript. You don't need to know anything about expected keyboard behaviors. You just need to know how to, how do I stop screen sharing? Whatever, stop sharing. You just need to know how to compare two screenshots in order to demonstrate there's a bug there. All you need is Windows and know how to turn on Windows high contrast mode. And I have a fair idea that fixing most of those issues is just going to be CSS. So it's not involving a screen reader. It's not involving keyboard behavior. It's not involving JavaScript, at least I hope not. Mostly it's just screenshots and CSS tweaks. And I think that's something where we could reach out to the front end contributors and say, come on board and join us with this one. I was also glad that we got more people working on tests, the functional JavaScript tests, because the kind of hidden benefit there, the not so obvious benefit, is that test writers are getting to know about expected behaviors in accessibility. So those are what I think are the challenges for getting new contributors. Yeah, we had that weird issue again with the sound.
Unfortunately, Tim had his mic on and made the echoes, so that wasn't me this time. Anyway.
Disclaimer noted. Well, we do still have a few more minutes left. Are there questions about this or a related issue that someone has? Or Andrew, do you just have more to share?
I don't. I kind of ran out of issues. The only thing to share is, where's it gone? I had the window open with a huge long list of everything tagged with accessibility, and I was almost going to say, is there anything there that people want explaining even? But we don't have to do that. Today we've got the Slack channel. If anyone's got questions about how they get involved, yeah, you can ask us, and there's a lot of the accessibility contributors are hanging out already in the Slack. Maybe there's an issue, a thing we could do where we could kind of hold an office hours thing, or either at Drupal sprints we could have some accessibility training, or in these kind of talks we could welcome new contributors and explain how screen readers work and things, as a way to get more people involved.
That sounds great. Do you have any training resources already available somewhere for someone who is getting started and maybe before or in between these types of events?
No, I think it's something I ought to work on. What I tend to have is a bunch of other people's materials, and they're they live in my head. I'll just go and open them up when I need them. Get a list of them written down would be a good idea. What I do is there's some great tutorials at places like WebAIM for each of the major screen readers, like VoiceOver or NVDA. You can have, and Chromevox or the Android TalkBack. They've all got their own little starter guide tutorials. I do know that whenever I'm at an event, I carry several pairs of headphones, and this little adapter gizmo that you shove it in the headphone socket, and it splits into 5, and you can shove like several sets of headphones into the same socket. And I've used that at some sprints to teach other people how to use the screen reader. What I usually do is say, here's how the keyboard works, tab, enter, spacebar, with the screen reader off, and then show them that it's the same with the screen reader on. And then I jump to things like, and here's how we jump through headings. And that's probably as much as I do on the basic intro. But things like, the summary and details, when you operate that in a screen reader, you get told that it's open, that it's expanded or closed, and so that's those are the next things that I start teaching people. I remember back at Dublin DrupalCon, Chris Cavity, he was just appointed as one of the new core release managers, one of the committers. And I remember he tapped me on the shoulder and says, could you show me how to use a screen reader? And we spent a sort of 15-20 minutes just having a little play with VoiceOver, because he had a Mac. And I thought that was a great, at the time I didn't twig he was a new core committer, but when I realized that he was, I thought, oh, that's brilliant. I've shown a core committer I've shown a release manager how a screen reader works. That's great.
That's awesome.
Donna, real quick, I got a question in the YouTube channel. Is there a list of accessibility features already in core and their typical applications?
Yes. Now, what I did was right at the very beginning, I said I wasn't going to talk on what we achieved in Drupal 8.0, like compared to Drupal 7. I wanted to see, what's happened since Drupal 8.0. The reason I didn't talk about that is because Mike Gifford, the other core accessibility maintainer, he has quite a lot of blog articles, and he's done podcasts and interviews and some presentations. I know that some of that is online, where and he's covered that in depth already. The new features that we've introduced in 8 that are better than what we had in Drupal 7. There is also a number of pages in the Drupal handbook. So if this question came from YouTube, maybe I'll dig out some links to those and answer in the YouTube comments, as well as on the Slack channel. But yeah, Mike has covered a lot of that in depth. There is I think, in fact, if you visit Drupal.org itself, the accessibility link in the footer there will lead you to some of the information. If I'm on Drupal.org, let me share my screen again. Ooh, Inception. Here we go. If I'm on Drupal.org, I go to the bottom and find the footer. There's these 5 columns, and one of them's got web accessibility. We have a list there of features in Drupal, and some links go through to developer resources. That's on groups.drupal.org. What's this one? Oh, no, that might not be what we want. Yeah, there's an accessibility section in the theming handbook, theming guide. This could do with an update, but we certainly have this one was linked from the accessibility statement. That's keyed at Drupal 7. Is there a Drupal 8 version? Creating accessible themes. We might need to update this stuff. But yeah, there is some stuff already there. Yeah.
And another good point, cleaning up documentation is a great way to contribute back, everybody. So
yes. I think, in fact, that marks a couple of documentation issues as being needed, documentation pages as needs an update.
Cool.
Yeah, that was one of the things we worked on at the sprint the other week. There was inline form errors is getting very close to stability, and one of the things that we had was a documentation issue, and that touched things like the help page that the module has under the main help section in the toolbar, and even little text like if you're on the modules page and going, oh, what's this module do if I enable it, updating the text there. But there's also some API documentation for inline form errors, like how do you disable it for one particular form, and there's a couple of handbook pages aimed at the site builders saying what is this module for and what are the benefits of installing it. So those just got written very recently.
Excellent.
Well, we don't have any others in this channel. Do you? Actually, there was one other question, is not even for Andrew. Do anybody else have any topics related to this, or in general that they wanted to learn about, that they're looking for resources of how to learn more about? Okay, well, we still have all the channels, so I suppose you can ask there too.
Right, there's always Drupal, the Drupal accessibility channel on Slack.
Yeah.
I know Hook 42 has been doing a lot of presentations for accessibility. Amy June, do you want to talk on that?
Actually, we haven't. It's something that we're looking to get into. We have one of our contractors doing some work on the inline form error, but we did host a meetup with Mike Gifford when he was in town. He reached out to me, and it was a conversation with Drupal shop owners and some developers about what we could do as a team, and we did talk about the inline form error. But as a company, we found that we aren't good at it. And as thought leaders, we need to improve. So that's where we're at.
Perfect. It's knowing's half the battle, I always like to say.
Sure.
Alrighty, cool. Well, looking forward to working with everybody more on this. I think it's 5 till. Donna, do you want to talk about what is happening next month?
Sure. I actually don't have that document open right now. I was really focused on this one, and I have so many tabs, I'm not sure I'll be able to find it, but I thought Damien was going to be talking to us.
Damien McKenna from Media Current.
From Media Current, yes. So I need to double check. I know I've heard of him too. So I need to double check. I thought he was scheduled for August, but I don't know if that's been changed. And honestly, I can't read any of my icons on my tabs anymore. So we're just going to let that go. Okay. Though I will post the information in the coming weeks. I'll be, as Carrie likes to say, I'll be hitting up a guy for helping me put together a flyer for that. And yeah, we'll have Carrie back next month too, and we'll just get the ball rolling and all that information as soon as we have it, but not right now.
Alrighty. Well, thanks everybody.
And thank you very much, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrew, and everybody for attending. Thanks for everybody for putting up with my technical difficulties from earlier, but we're learning this still, so life's good. It's better to learn than not. So. And
thank you, Mark, for setting that up at all, because as many technical difficulties as you had, I'm sure some of the rest of us would be far less eloquent. On the
plus side, this is actually available on YouTube now. You don't have to wait for me to edit the sound from one computer to the video of another computer, which is making my life a lot easier. So it's there. And if only I can get the podcast to be that simple.
Well, thank you very much for your efforts as well. So Have a wonderful day, everybody. We'll be talking to you next month and in between in the Drupal Slack channel. And have a great day.
And I feel bad. I didn't get to turn on Tobias's camera without him knowing. I can do it now.
Can we do that?
Oh, all I can do is hide from broadcast. Oh, well. Anyway, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.